My name is David Fulford. I'm tremendously grateful. It's almost a celebration for me to be considered to be on the Board of Elders. I've served on the Board of Elders here before, and this is a testimony to God just doing some incredible work in my life. And it's a testimony to this church. How about if I open us in a word of prayer? Heavenly Father, God, thank you for today. God, thank you for how you've been worshiped. Thank you for the blood of the Lamb. And thank you for our redemption. God, I thank you for the privilege it is to, God, stand before your people and to share what you've put on my heart. To share what you've done for me, God, and may others be encouraged by it and reminded about what you can do for them. God, be glorified, and may we be edified. And I ask it in Jesus' name. So as I said, my name is David Fulford. My bride, Stacy, will be celebrating 26 years of marriage next month. And thank you. And she's the most amazing woman I know. I could spend all morning just talking about her, but I'm not going to do that. We have two beautiful children. My daughter, Lainey, who we adopted from China. She's 19. And in fact, she turned 19 yesterday. Happy birthday. And she'll be attending Savannah College of Art and Design this coming January. We just toured it this past week. It's a beautiful place. And then our son, Elijah, he's 9, so 10-year gap. Matt and I can relate. He's a third grader at South Lake Christian. He's just such a blessing. He's the neatest kid in the world. So I'll give you a little overview about this morning. I'm going to share a little bit about me, particularly in the last couple years. I wanted to share what I know about this church because I've been on the elder board for quite a while here and why it's so special. And then we're going to get into some scripture. So 2 years ago, and it was 2 years ago this month, almost to the day, I stood before this congregation and said that though I love being an elder, I needed to resign. And so for some brief context to that, my wife, Stacy, was experiencing a lot of grief. And what brought this grief on was the loss of her best friend of 35 years to ovarian cancer. They were super close, super tight. And then her mom declining with dementia, Alzheimer's, and her mom lived in our home. And this gradually progressed to where she was losing sleep. She didn't have much of an appetite. Anxiety began to manifest, depression, panic attacks. And I didn't know how to really shepherd that. And so the elders were really gracious to me. During that time, they would take things off my plate. I had a lot of administrative roles, not so much shepherding, which I'd like to do more of that now. But they would take responsibilities off my plate, and as well-intended as that was, it was really just a Band-Aid. And so it became obvious to me that I needed to resign, and I mentioned that, and then they offered to give me a sabbatical, an indefinite one. And I thought about that, and I prayed about it, but I just felt like I would still feel the mantle of ministry, and that, and honestly, I didn't know if God would restore us, or if He would work. The New Testament, one thing it speaks about is that there will be suffering, and our hope is in Him, but it doesn't necessarily mean our circumstances here and now will ever improve. And so, I'd served for nearly a decade on the board, and this wasn't really the retirement story I was looking for, but it was just very obvious. Paul in 1 Timothy 3 says that if someone does not know how to manage his own household, how will he care for the household of God? So this was a no-brainer for me. I needed to step down. My family is and will always be my first calling, my first ministry, and it's who I'm first called to shepherd. So maybe you're wondering what's happened and why am I here now? And that's a great question. I want to share about what God has done. When I stepped down, I really had no idea what to do or how to bring healing or how to lead. It wasn't as if I knew if I do X, Y, and Z, then I'll get the result I'm looking for. But I did know this. I'm just going to seek him and wherever he leads, whatever his direction, and realizing that his hand has been on my life. I was studying the book of Job a couple years before I stepped down. Job has a lot of acquaintance with suffering, and I was reading that, and I came across a verse in Job 23 that happens to be a life verse of mine, which is Job 23:14. He will complete what he appoints for me, and many such things are in his mind. And what I loved about this verse at the time was because I've had a rather bizarre career path, and I'm kind of related to that verse that way. In my early 20s, I was a touring musician. I lived in the back of a van, and when I wasn't touring, in between shows, I would deliver Chinese food. And then eventually, I started a little photography business, and just to see if maybe I could do that. And then we moved here, and I took a part-time job as a teller at Bank of America just because they had some magnificent adoption assistance, and that would help us to pay for our adoption. And then I met this market exec, and he really liked me. And then 3 years later, without a college degree, I'm sitting in front of guys that run $50 and $100 million companies trying to present the entire depth and breadth of Bank of America. I don't know how I got there. God did it. And then I would leave the bank, and I would take off my suit, and I'd put on a Pizza Hut uniform so I could deliver at night so we could earn extra money to help pay for this adoption. And then I left the bank in 2008, and I began flipping houses, and I did that for a number of years. And for the last 11 years, I've been partnered with one of my dear friends. He's a general contractor, and we've been building residential homes here in the community, and then also we left the Asheville community about a year ago, so our hearts definitely connected there. So that was what kind of shaped this verse in my life. But as I've had really a lot of time to reflect on it, what I see is that it's the providential, really the miraculous hand of God on my life. I didn't do this. And so that was the blueprint for our healing, was to recognize that he's done everything and just to be obedient to him. Wherever he led, I would follow. And whatever he asked us to do, no matter how silly it seemed to me, that's what I was going to do. And that's what we've been doing. And I can't get into all the things that we said yes to, but I want to tell you the heart of our healing. And we found it in the bride of Christ. We found it in you guys. We came in late. We sat on the back row. We cried. We left early. And you never judged us. You visited us. You invited us to coffee. You sent us messages. You brought us flowers. You invited us to Bible studies. You invited us to the men's and women's ministries when we really had nothing offered other than just to show up. You prayed, you encouraged us, and honestly, you guys loved us how I would envision the bride of Christ is supposed to love. Men walked with me, and women walked with Stacy to help us out of where we were, and especially the Boyds. Jackie's been meeting with Stacy for just every week for a long time, and Dee with me. And thank you for pouring your lives into us. I don't know. You've been there for us and lifted us up. And then Pastor Matt. Pastor Matt has been with us since day one, since we stepped down. And I've served with Matt, and Matt's a close friend of mine as well. And he's like a smarter kid brother. And the only thing I do better than him is putt, which isn't saying much because he's horrible at it. It's awful to watch. But Matt, the Boyds, they have heard it all, and they've held the gospel in front of us. And that's made the difference. It really has. It's amazing what happens when you let somebody in your life. So through all this faithfulness, I'm convinced, and I get to say that his miraculous power has made us stronger. I feel stronger, although I'm definitely weaker. I'm aware of it in every way. David wrote in Psalm 119, verse 71, "It was good that I was afflicted, that I might learn your statutes." I know what that's like now, to have hard things happen to me and come out the other end and say, thank you, God, for doing that. And he's also brought healing. In Jeremiah chapter 30, verse 17, God says, "For I will restore health to you, and your wounds I will heal, declare the Lord." Listen, if you're in a hard time right now, if you hear nothing else, believe me that God can meet you where you are, and he can bring healing. You just have to let him. You have to let other people in. He does work. So, I'm very aware that I can't work for my salvation, that Jesus has paid my debt, but I definitely feel a debt of gratitude to the church for how well you guys have ministered to us. Maybe you've noticed there's something really special happening here at this church. It just is. Everybody I talk to, you kind of see it and feel it. The bride of Christ, to me, is a profound mystery. It is something I have a particular fondness for. And this is something I've always had a desire to serve. Even when I was stepping down, I still desired it. I just couldn't do it. So I thought it might be a good thing for me to share a little bit about why Church of Denver is so special. What makes us so special is the gospel has always been above everything. It is above personalities. It is above branding. It is above programs. It is above the Sunday morning experience. It is above everything. And that's what makes it special here. We don't get hung up on secondary matters of whether the earth is old or is the earth new. Not to say that doesn't matter, but it's just not an essential doctrine. So to put it another way, we keep the main thing the main thing. I first came to this church back in 2009. We were Providence Church. I was invited by a friend who was a pastor here, Bobby, and I was invited they had a men's leadership training going on a Saturday morning. I hadn't even come to a church service, and I thought, wow, that's pretty interesting. I'm getting invited to a leadership training, and I don't even go to their church. And because I had expressed that I was, been a believer for about 5 years, I'd never been discipled. I didn't know anything about that. I wanted it, and I didn't know how to find it. And so they invited me in, and Ben Rudolph, our planting pastor, said, "Oh, I'll disciple you." And so we met for nearly 3 years every week, and he poured his life into me. And then around 2012 and ish, somewhere in there, I didn't write the date down because I didn't know I was supposed to. He asked me if I would consider being an elder, and at that time I declined. My wife had been having some seizures, and we weren't quite sure if we were in the clear or not. And so about a year later, she's in the clear, and he approached me again, would I consider it? And so I agreed, and the church was affirmed my call. And when I came on the board of elders, I didn't know what I was doing. There's no manual for me like, here, this is what you do. So I just paid attention, and I kind of was quiet and observed. And I started seeing areas where I thought I could improve things or protect the church a little bit. So, it was very much an administrative role. I filed our 501c3 so we could, have that with the IRS. I helped shore up some of our bylaws. There was just, boring stuff to a lot of people. It was probably boring to me, but it's important. I felt the need to do it. And another thing that's very just fantastic about this church is a sending church. Matter of fact, we have 6 on a team right now in Jordan, and Pastor Matt is one of them. And I just heard from this morning that he was invited to preach today at the Church of Nazarene in Jordan. That's incredible. I got to see a picture of this place. Becky pulled it up for me. I did not know that. And I don't think Matt knew that was going to happen before he got there. But we've sent people there. We'll be sending Andrew and Serena Yant to Germany. When this church was only about 5 or 6 years old, very, very new, we sent 2 of our best elders, some of our highest capacity givers, up to the Newton Conover area to plant Gospel Life. And today it's called Vertical Life. They've had a little bit of merger, but that church is still going on because this church didn't covet resources and people. This church wanted to send it out. So that makes it something really unique about our church. In 2017, when our lead pastor, Ben Rudolph, stepped down, he just felt he needed to get out of the way so that God could continue to move and work. What a sacrificial thing. There was no character issue or anything. He just wanted the gospel to advance here in the community. And this is what he felt the Lord put on his heart. And that was really hard when that happened, because we had to figure out what to do, and we had to figure out what to do without a lead pastor. So we leveraged every wise person we know. Brad Strock was one of them, our treasurer, that we decided the best thing that we could do was to do a church health survey by an independent consulting firm. And what they would do is they would provide questionnaires to a lot of the members, every member we could, as a matter of fact, and then as many interviews as we could get, personal one-on-one with the elders, leadership, staff, and that way we could get, the purpose of this was that we could understand precisely what are we good at, what are we not good at, what do we value, are we missing anything that we should value, and we're going to take these results and use that to inform the type of lead pastor we're going to get. And that's how, after a year, when we put together a search committee, I chaired that, and then eventually Pastor Matt's resume comes up, and I go, wow, this one looks pretty interesting, and so did everybody else. And there was a spirit about that, and it was almost a year after when Ben announced to when Matt came in. It was a breath of fresh air. I certainly was to me. I know the whole church was grateful because we were thin. There was one point in time where Matt and myself and Steve Gillespie were the only elders, and I was feeling ministry fatigue by then. I can already tell you, because my mother-in-law was declining, and I was feeling it. But Matt has done an incredible job. There's to see the elders brought on like Ron and Drew, who do a dynamic job. Our former elder D. Boyd, just tremendously gifted guys who God brought in. I think that's under Matt's leadership. He's a really good pastor. He really is. So I'm bringing all this up because I'm talking about a couple of seasons. There was, the season for me in the last couple years, and the seasons that I've seen the church go through. And so I thought it would be good. There's a book in here in the Bible called Ecclesiastes, and I'm getting a laugh here from Steve. I'm part of a Thursday morning men's Bible study, and a couple books ago, we went through the book of Ecclesiastes. I suggested it. It's not an encouraging book. It's pretty depressing. And so because of that, I'm not allowed to pick the book anymore. So, and I don't blame you. But, Solomon is not in a good place at all. And you can see that in chapters 1 and 2. He's trying to find meaning in life. And he's trying to find it everywhere. He thought, I'll try drinking wine. Thought maybe if I just party and have fun, then I can find meaning in life. He thought, well, maybe I can just acquire stuff like nice houses, just materialism. If I have enough stuff, then I'll find meaning in life. And he didn't find it there. And he thought, well, maybe if I just get smarter. So he's chasing after wisdom. If he just has more knowledge, then that'll fix everything. And what he found is all of that is vanity and chasing after the wind. And I think what happens is he realizes every bit of it's temporary. So if you will, if you have a Bible, or you can just read along, we're going to be in Ecclesiastes chapter 3. It's the book right next to Proverbs, if you're looking for it, which is just before Psalms. For everything there is a season, a time for every matter under heaven, a time to be born and a time to die, a time to plant and a time to pluck up what is planted, a time to kill and a time to heal, a time to break down and a time to build up, a time to weep and a time to laugh, a time to mourn and a time to dance, a time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones together, a time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing, a time to seek and a time to lose, a time to keep and a time to cast away, a time to tear and a time to sow, a time to keep silent and a time to speak, a time to love, a time to hate, a time for war, and a time for peace. I first learned these verses with my dad listening to the oldie station. There's a band called The Byrds. They had a number one hit in 1965 called Turn, Turn, Turn. It's a really pleasant song, actually, if you listen to it. It's just easy listening music, which is kind of weird because if you just read this, it doesn't sound very easy. I mean, some of it sounds easy, but the other half of the coin sounds kind of rough. And I hear Solomon's a little bit frustrated. And Solomon's list isn't exhaustive about time. If you're a married couple, you know there's a time that you really connect, and you know there's a time you clash. And if you're a parent, you know there's a time where you're just profoundly overjoyed. And other times, you pull your hair out. Well, not me, but you. And I feel like there's a time to step down, and there's a time to lead. You know, most of us know the feeling of wasting time. We allocate time to things we don't actually enjoy. Long commutes, working some type of job that maybe we just do it to then and something else will happen. And then we try to redeem the time that we don't like with things that maybe will make it a little bit more palatable. Maybe we can listen to a podcast or, text with a friend. And maybe on a commute, if we're really wise and prudent, we'd pray. But all we're trying to do is make time not such an enemy. If we can continue in verse 9. What gain has the worker from his toil? I've seen the business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. He's made everything beautiful in its time. He has also put eternity into man's heart, yet so that he cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end. I perceived that there is nothing better for them than to be joyful and to do good as long as they live. Also that everyone should eat and drink and take pleasure in all his toil. This is God's gift to man. I perceived that whatever God does endures forever. Nothing can be added to it, nor anything taken from it. God has done it so that people fear before him. That which is already has been. That which is to be already has been. And God seeks what has been driven away. In verse 9, I feel like I feel that frustration. What gain has the worker from his toil? And you can feel Solomon going, what's the point? 100 years from now, everything that I've had, all my assets, all the blessings, they'll all be gone. And yet, chase them. I saw a video of a man recently who lives in Asheville, and he was standing by the river as the storm began, and he's filming with his iPhone, and the river's starting to rise a little bit, and he pans over and he goes, "There's the deck I've been working on this morning, but I'm going to have to stop right now." And the waters rose, and he left, and when he came back, not only was the deck gone, but his house was too. What happened in that moment of time was completely out of that man's hands. It's difficult. We feel Solomon's frustration. He's rightfully frustrated, but we don't give up. Time is an issue, and we're all dealing with it. And we can feel how precious it is, and it's scarce. And there's this tension of the positive seasons that we have and the negative ones, whether it's self-inflicted or just happened to us. All of it shows is that time is finite. Time is not eternal. And yet in verse 11, God states that he will put eternity on our heart. So the way I think of that is implanted in every single person is this notion or this sense of eternity. This is kind of complex and fascinating. Eternity is an attribute only to God. And it is completely unique to him. Nothing else is eternal. That is, there is nothing without beginning or without end. That's to God alone. And somehow that is put in our heart. It's crazy. It's a fascinating thing. And it's tempted to think that God is like on this continual line. And it just goes that way forever, and it's been going that way forever. And that's not the case. God is not even on the line. God created time when he created the first day. And we see that in the creation account in Genesis chapter 1. And God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. And God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from darkness. God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning the first day. Day one. And so we see that in order to have a day one created, you have to be outside of that day. And so God is infinite, and he is eternal, but he does insert himself into time to be an ever-present God. He's not absent at all, just because he's eternal. He's in the details of all of our lives. David writes in Psalm 139, verses 1 through 3, "O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know when I sit down. You know when I rise up. You discern my thoughts from afar. You search out my path and my lying down and are acquainted with all my ways." So though God is infinite and we are finite, he is acquainted with all our ways. He's acquainted with all my ways. I wish I had time to hit every single verse in Ecclesiastes 3, but to cover what Matt asked me to cover, I don't. But there are two things I would like to point out as evidence of God being in the details of our lives. The first one is this book. It's the Bible. The last part of verse 15, it says that God seeks what has been driven away. He's a pursuing God. This book, to me, is evidence that God is pursuing God. That is a love letter to all of mankind. And it is filled with so many examples of God being in the details of man. It is more than just 66 books. It is more than written by 40. It's more than that. It is more than 1,500 years of history. This is like a cohesive example across time of God coming in to help fallen man. That's what this book is. And the second, and I think the most important way that we see God in the details is his coming in the flesh. And Paul wrote in Romans chapter 5, "For a while we were still weak, at the right time, Christ died for the ungodly." Jesus, who is the Word, who spoke all things into existence that we see in the Gospel of John, the one who made all things through him and for him, and without nothing was made, he created it all. And then he stepped out of that into the flesh, stepped out of eternity to live a perfect life that you and I cannot live. And he performed signs and wonders and miracles so we would know he was God. And in the end, he was alone. He was in a garden praying in agony, if only this cup could pass. A cup full of the wrath of God. But he said, "Not my will, but your will be done." He was arrested for crimes he didn't commit. He was abandoned by his followers. He was brought before corrupt religious officials and corrupt politicians. And then he was beaten and flogged and made to carry the cross that he'd be nailed to. And as he hung on the cross, we mocked him, saying, "If you are who you say you are, climb down. But he didn't, because he wanted to be in the details of our lives. And he died, and he buried. And on the third day, he rose and he defeated death. See, what makes time so difficult is because of death. And that's what Jesus fixed. God's in the details. He can work. He's proved it. I have to wonder at times, why don't I always believe it? I want to pretend and act strong in front of you all like I do that and be a hypocrite. There's times where my faith is really weak. But yet God works. My faith was really weak. I was an elder here. And he just came in and loved me and met me where I'm at. It's profound. I need to wrap up. So what do we do about time? You know, Moses, he actually did some authoring in the book of Psalms. Psalm 90, verse 12. So teach us to number our days, that we may get a heart of wisdom. Know that our days are numbered. They're precious. Know they're numbered. Our days matter. They're gifts to us. God instructs us to steward our time. But how? How do we steward it? It's not complicated. It's not easy either, but it's certainly not complicated to figure out. Or serve Him. Love God, love others. Enjoy Him. Just to enjoy God. I would love to see a healing. Someone's like healed, like maybe their arm's broken, but I've yet to see that. I believe it, but I haven't seen it. But I can look at my life and absolutely see a miracle. I hope you review your life that way, to think about, even if you're in the hard right now, even if life's really tough, that there's a God who loves you. Let me pray. Jesus, you're so worthy. God, forgive me for not making much of you all the time. God, I pray for this congregation. That you'd work, God, like you do. That we be a patient people. That we wouldn't be too proud to ask for help.